welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we're going to talk about how to draw a moose. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here is the moose. It's, for the most part, straightforward. He's got the light brown over most of him, right underneath on his chin, and then the little flap of skin he's got here are kind of a darker brown and around his eyes. And then the antlers are kind of another lighter brown, but still brownish from what I could tell. So we are just going to get started. They obviously have a lot of humps. It's got a hump, going up to about here. And then the nose, so doing the overlapping strokes. We're going to kind of curve it in as we bring it down. Always putting them in between each other to create the effect of fur. Now, I'm not typically, I've done a lot of animals with antlers, but antlers, surprisingly, are something that can take a lot of time because of, they're these long, sort of thin, with not a lot of jagged edges and things, like, just takes a little bit longer to do. Bring this down. I'm going to be curving that kind of in a bit. The ones coming sort of right in the middle won't be curving as much. Probably curve them just a little, but not a whole lot, because you'll want to make sure that there's no line conflict between one side and the other. But once we've sorted that out, we can have the bottom kind of curving in. Sometimes as I'm drawing, I find it easier, especially on, when I'm following a contour like that, to start from above instead of staying connected, right? Start from above and draw it down. Just as long as there's no line conflicts, doesn't matter. All of these line direction changes are creating a texture on the moose's face, because they have quite a lot. So by changing the direction, it's an easy way to indicate that there's bumps or there's dips or there's other things happening in their faces. But I just have to be more careful as I do it, not to create line conflicts around the eye or anywhere else as I'm bringing it down. Which is why I'm drawing, again, top to bottom, because that's how I'm having the hair come. So there's a hump here, and off of the hump where you have just a slight overturn, I'm then going to an under and creating that kind of effect. Because that'll indicate a hump. Even if I take off that drawing layer, you can kind of see it looks like there's a little bit of a hump here. So just changing the line directions can do quite a lot. And then immediately going back over, because I'm going to do the same thing as I bring it down, right? Like we're going to have these lines coming down. And then there's another hump here, so you have it kind of humping down, going into another lower line. Now I find it easier with antlers or things like this that kind of come to a point to start at the point and draw down. You may find it easier to do it a different way, but because it comes to a point, you want a nice sort of neat point, which is why I start at the tip. I'll do it sometimes with like teeth and other things. Claws, if they're coming to a point, sometimes I'll change my direction and draw from the point. Now in the middle of his ears he's got some white, but we're probably going to add that later. I'm going to have the light source coming from above and to the right. Like always, and like I always say, that means it's coming from above and in front of, not behind. So it's not going to be back or to the side. It's above and in front of. And we're just going to get started. And like always, all edges are always in shadow, even the side on the light source, because even that's going into, it's rounding away. As it rounds, it's rounding away from the light source, even though it's on that side. And then, of course, as his mouth dips in, this would be in shadow. Because again, it's rounding away from that light source. It's rounding into his mouth. Now, as I build up his nose, I've been able to use shadow on a couple of these lines here, right? Like you have, part of the nose that comes out here, and then you have another section here. And all of that, I can use shadows because they kind of round away and there's a separation between what we can see. But as this hump connects back to his face, there won't be. All of this will be in highlight. That's where the change in strokes can come in handy, because we'll see the texturizing of moving the strokes up and down. So from here, coming from a hump to a recess, we'll see that visually once it's all kind of put together. But that's one of the reasons that I do it. You need to be able to adjust and change the strokes. It's just sort of an easy way to add textures onto a figure. Now I sort of lightly feathered all that in because I need to start deciding where to have it start going into shadow. Right, it's just a little easier to draw it in to make that decision and have it kind of feather in. I'm just going to mix this darker brown in with this tanner color. It's kind of reddish brown. They have, it kind of seems to change as to when this kicks in. But they have kind of a variety of, different colors here. Just deciding to do what to do about this little neck bulge. I don't know that it really works. It's not really, because it's on their neck, it's not on their face, so it's not really something I need to have. If I detach it, I just need to be careful not to mess with what I already have on the chin. Do you think that looks better? We're going to fix some of these edges. All right, now onto the antlers. So with the light source coming from this way, a good portion of this side will actually probably be in shadow. This whole edge of this sort of flatter section is likely going to be in shadow because it's all turned away from the light source. Now the little individual bumps, not so much. Those will catch some highlight. This is in highlight. Might be a little bit of a bump of highlight too here because it kind of dips down as it goes, but it's not going to go for very long. Now each one of these individual sort of horns, antlers, antler pieces sticking up, you would shadow individually, right? So like you have this piece that's detached from everything, so it's going to have shadow and highlight based on, you know, that. Based on the fact that he's individual as opposed to this big one, which, you know, is one giant space, so therefore not be the same. And the highlight's going to shift as it comes down because you have, you know, a section that's in highlight over here that would be going into shadow as it's facing downward instead. Right now I'm just sort of lightly putting pen pressure. I'm not really filling it in. I'm not necessarily highlighting it at the moment. And of course all edges go into shadow. The antlers are no different. But as we bring it down, right, light source coming from over here, this is now going to get deeper and deeper underneath. It's going to shift to kind of the middle because it's certainly not going to pick up on the other side. But it is going to pick up on the front of it. And it'll fade out on either side until it sort of flattens out here where it'll be more on top. And we're going to flesh out all these highlights on this side and we'll move to the other side. As we bring this down, these will connect together, these highlights, from, you know, this kind of branch into this main spot. Right, because it gets kind of, this is almost like one thick antler. So this section will all kind of come down as one big addition when it connects back to the main antler, main branch. I don't really know what to call it. Antler fingers. Well, they have kind of ridges in their antlers, that's why I'm creating kind of a ridged effect, right, where I'm putting some highlight and then a dip. Didn't really show a lot of those ridges in the base of the antler, but just doing that little bit should imply enough without me having to do a whole lot. And then I just have to feather out this underside so that's not a harsh transition. Alright, there's the first one. Now just like the other one, I'm going to lightly fill in this one too, but this one's going to have more highlight than the other side, because you have this whole big flat section that would be catching the light. And then the individual antler fingers that you would shadow individually, highlight and shadow individually. Now, on this side, you know, you have the dip of the head, so there's going to be a little bit of shadowing right against the head before a highlight's really going to kick in, and you'll end up solid highlight going into shadow under here. And then, of course, you start getting these guys. Now again, like on the edge, it's facing kind of down, and the top would be also facing away from the light source, so it's going to be more in the middle instead of on one side or another. Still going to be centered just off, but not as closely. This one though is more turned upright, so it is going to have that weighted balance. Putting some finishing touches on the antlers, and we will move on to finishing the ears and then the eyes. Just making sure this shadow isn't too crazy, too much. The ears have the white, sort of white tuft in them. I am going to move this layer underneath the horn layer, just in case I have some strokes that come over. Just going to lightly fill in some white. On animals like this, you know, you're going to have white on either side. The ear is partially hidden, but the dark part of the ear where everything's sort of fading into is going to be more in the middle. So we're just going to do that, and then we're going to add on the other side, and then we'll add the highlights, right? So as I do it, it's going to be slightly longer strokes, not always going in the same direction, but matching it on the other side as well. Getting the tips of these hairs in highlight based on what I already drew, and then making sure it just fades back into the ear. Do the same thing on this side, except instead of the tips, it's probably going to be more of the middle. Fades into the ear on this side, and then it's going to fade away from us, like the tips of the hair is aimed away from the light source, so tips themselves probably won't be in highlight, but this sort of middle section of the ear will be, of the hair. Now we have the eyes. Just like always, I'm going to take the select tool and highlight the pupil. Make sure it's perfectly circular and just erase out. Same thing on this side. And then fix the edges. Inevitably that does cause gaps, as you can see. And then we will just fill them in. Always put that burst against the pupil, going underneath, and then adding the highlight. There's not a whole lot of space for the eye, right? So there won't be a whole lot that we really need to do, except fill in just this little bit. And then on this side it goes to shadow. Same thing on this side. Not putting as much pin pressure, so I'm giving it a highlight, but I'm not brightening it up quite as much as the other side. And the final thing, one of the most important things you can do, is adding a light flare. I always do it on the side of the shadow first. We're going to be trimming this one back. So this one, we're going to take this little select tool, and we are just going to create some texture to trim it. Partly mimicking the ones that are pretty close, and then just carving out some from there. Alright, so that is how you draw a moose. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.